For over a decade, we've been mesmerized by the Brown family saga. We've shared in the moments of laughter and love, welcomed new additions, and cringed through the hard goodbyes. But what if all we'd come to believe, what if all TLC, so carefully constructed for TV, was nothing more than a glossy facade? What if, lurking just outside the camera's frame, there was a storm quietly gathering strength? A storm so calculating and so destructive that it would eventually threaten to rip this family apart, not just emotionally, but financially and legally? Tonight, here on Sister Wives Crew, we're pulling the curtain back on what insiders are already calling the family's most shocking scandal to date. This isn't just about the messy breakups you've seen on screen or the emotional blow-ups that kept us coming back season after season. No, this is about whispers of hidden LLCs, suspicious money trails, and a web of manipulation that paints an entirely different picture of life inside the Brown household. What we're dealing with here isn't just a family drama. It's a reckoning, a confrontation that doesn't culminate in a teary couch confession, but within the sterile walls of a courthouse. Hi and welcome back, your #1 source for peeling back the layers of secrets of the Brown family. If you're someone who thinks the truth is always stranger than fiction, and you have a feeling this family's tale is anything but finished, then do yourself a favor. Give that like button a hit, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because believe me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this unraveling. All right, let's dive in. For years, rumors have swirled in the shadows. Whispers of favoritism, of hidden cracks in the so-called united front. But the story we're about to piece together, based on what sources close to the Browns have revealed, combined with careful analysis of what we've all seen unfold on screen, is darker and more shocking than any of us could have imagined. To really get the firestorm that's now brewing towards a legal explosion, we need to turn the clock back. We need to see beyond the shiny smiles and scripted Sunday dinners and look at the ground it was all premised on, a platform of manipulation, control, and financial secrecy. The meltdown didn't result from one massive blow. It was a gradual eroding, a calculated course of action, intended to distance Cody from the wives and children who had been with him from the start, and to centralize all the authority, emotional and financial, in the hands of one woman, his fourth and sole legally recognized wife, Robyn. Now, a lot of you in the comments have been shouting this out for years. You've pointed to how Cody's work schedule as a traveling businessman became a lightning rod for tension, how he seemed always to be rooted at Robyn's side while ignoring the rest of his family. But sources claim this wasn't laziness, nor was it casual favoritism. It was strategy, purposeful, calculated. We've even heard it from Tony, never one to sugarcoat, who flat out said Robyn uses guilt like a weapon. Think about that for a moment. Guilt. Not compromise, not partnership, but emotional pressure. Robyn allegedly convinced Cody that every trip away from her wasn't simply time spent with his other wives or children, it was a betrayal. His divine responsibility to his family was manipulated into a story in which he was the villain for abandoning her side. Sources allege that this wasn't mere nagging, it was punishment. And the punishment was not yelling or fighting. It was colder, more efficient, the withholding of affection, the smothering pressure of her worry, the guilt trips in which he felt like leaving would break their home. Gradually, Cody was conditioned, trained nearly like a pet to remain wherever Robyn desired him, where she could observe him, manipulate him, dominate him. And the ramifications? Catastrophic. We witnessed them unfold on television. Just consider his estranged relationship with Truly, a daughter he should have adored, but only bothered to see a few times annually, and even then, always through an intermediary. Their relationship appeared to be an obligation among faraway relatives, rather than the affection of a father and child. Why? Because each visit to Utah was not merely a trip to visit Truly, it was a certain verdict of guilt and punishment awaiting him upon his return home to Robyn. But here's where the story turns darker, because emotional control was only one weapon in this battle. The other, far more insidious, was financial control. Take McKelty's raw, unfiltered account. She laid bare the truth that so many of us suspected. Cody's financial track record was littered with selfish projects, like the endless money pit of Coyote Pass, while the basic needs of his children were left hanging in the balance. Who covered Isabel's expensive spinal surgery? Not Cody, not Robyn. Christine, frantically selling her belongings online just to pay for her daughter's medical expenses. Who covered cars, tuition, the daily expenses of 18 children. Again and again, it rested on the backs of the other wives. Janelle, Christine, and even Meri were expected to fund their own households while still pouring everything they earned into a so-called family pot. And as we'll soon discover, that pot wasn't nearly as united as they were led to believe. And then came Valentine's Day, the moment that would break whatever fragile silence remained. A day meant to celebrate love and family turned into a public display of favoritism. Cody presented Robyn's youngest daughter, Ariella, with a lavish, bespoke vanity. the type of present that bellowed, "You are the princess of this family." And yet, what did the other daughters receive? A box of chocolates at best. Nothing at all at worst. Not even a phone call for Truly, the daughter he hardly acknowledged. The contrast was brutal, and it wasn't lost on anyone. To McKelty, it was evidence of a lie she'd lived for years. This fiction of Cody as the benevolent provider. When funds at last rolled in, funds from TLC, funds that were the property of all of them, the bounty was never divided. They were directed to one side, to one home, to one woman's children. And that extravagant vanity, it wasn't an anointed gift. It was a message, loud and cruel. Loyalty is rewarded. Dissent is punished. That one piece of furniture stood as a symbol, a monument to years of financial favoritism, emotional neglect, and the cold, hard fact that Cody's love came with strings. And it set off the flame that would fuel the inferno, the confrontation, the unraveling, and finally, the lawsuit. But the thing was, the Valentine's Day blowout wasn't on a whim. The foundation had been prepared. Janelle, shy, detail-oriented, the family's de facto bookkeeper, had been paying attention. She'd always kept an eye on her own finances, but for years had taken for granted that the main family account, the notorious Dabsark LLC, was being dealt with in a way that was fairly. The math, however, wasn't working. How could Cody and Robyn be drowning in debt when they are residing in a $1 million mansion, having a full-time nanny, and splurging money on extravagances? Where was the truth? Janelle began questioning. She began investigating, and what she discovered would rock the entire family. Christine's determination became ironclad. She talked a reluctant but devoted Janelle, and even a scared but stubborn Meri, into believing this was the only way. Cody and Robyn were never going to come clean about what they'd done. They would never confess. They would never willingly repay what had been stolen away. If justice was ever going to be served, it had to be extracted through the courts. So the three women made a daring move. They didn't sit down with a family mediator and get all hopey-feely about kumbaya solutions and soft compromises. No, they declared war. They looked for an aggressive legal team, one that specialized in dismantling complex financial cases and tracking down secret money leads. This was not a divorce lawyer. This was not a family therapist. This was a law firm that broke up rotten partnerships. Because that's what they ultimately realized the Brown family for what it really was. Not a union, not a spiritual vow, but a business venture, one where the two self-proclaimed executives, Cody and Robyn, had reportedly stolen the company's fortune. The task was ruthless and crystal clear. Take down the entire financial edifice of the Brown Empire, lay bare the fraud at its heart, and claw back every last dollar that had been stolen in broad daylight. This was not a tale of a breakup. This was a corporate dismantling. And the suit they brought? It was a masterpiece of legal strategy. A multi-pronged attack on Cody and Robyn from all directions. Let's go through exactly how the plaintiffs constructed their case. Stay with me, because this legal playbook is both brilliant and chilling. First, breach of fiduciary duty. In any business partnership, a commercial venture, or a family-owned LLC, there is a holy trust to conduct oneself in good faith, to be open, and to handle money for everyone's interest. The suit claimed that Cody, having self-styled himself patriarch and money manager of the family's LLC, Dabsark, completely violated that trust. Instead of openness, he supposedly formed concealed entities with Robyn, moved assets without approval, and utilized collective resources to benefit solely himself and her. The allegation portrayed him not as an inept money manager, but as a man who consciously violated the legal and ethical trust incumbent upon his partners. Second, fraudulent conveyance. This is where things become particularly damning. Fraudulent conveyance, also referred to as fraudulent transfer, is the transfer of cash or property to defraud creditors of that to which they are legally entitled. And who are those creditors here? Janelle, Christine, and Meri. They were entitled to the family pot. The suit alleged that as soon as Cody and Robyn felt the other wives slipping away from them, they started draining the joint accounts, pumping money into companies such as KSW Products, LLC, and putting assets in Robyn's name alone. Why? To leave the joint accounts bare so that when the women departed, there wouldn't be anything remaining for them to take. A classic but very illegal shell game. Third, unjust enrichment. That strikes a nerve. Janelle and Christine were not just primary earners within the household, but also raked in gazillions of dollars through TLC filming for years. All of it went into that so-called family account. The suit alleged Cody and Robyn took those contributions and used them to fund a life of luxury for themselves. A Flagstaff mansion, shopping, nannies, and comfort, while the very women providing all the funding were left with leftovers. Christine had to rebuild her whole life from scratch in Utah. Janelle was living literally in an RV. The disproportion was appalling. The suit demanded restitution. Fourth, civil conspiracy. This was important. as it legally bound Cody and Robyn as equal conspirators in the scam. No longer could Robyn be the innocent bystander or victimized wife. The lawsuit portrayed her as co-conspirator, working deliberately, urging isolation of the other wives, and knowingly profiting from the financial drain. Even her notorious "we had to protect the little children" defense was turned against her, evidence that she was in full knowledge, in full participation, and in full collusion. Fifth, partition and sale of real property. Yes, Coyote Pass, the never-ending promise that became a cemetery for shattered hopes. All the wives had their names attached to that land, but it lay vacant, a tool Cody used to keep them economically bound to him. The suit called for legal division, compelling the court to decree the land sold at public sale, proceeds divided equitably among all co-owners. This was their opportunity to finally sever relationships, recover what they'd put in, and leave free. Sixth, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And this was the most intimate and agonizing claim of all. It was no longer about the money. It was all about the years of cruelty, the public shaming, the gaslighting, the abandonment. The lawsuit specifically targeted Isabel's surgery as a focal point of all this suffering. Cody's refusal to fly with his daughter, under the guise of COVID safety, while continuing to see Robyn, was framed as not only bad parenting, but deliberate emotional cruelty. It caused permanent damage to mother and child, a shocking action that the plaintiffs claimed was so egregious as to amount to legal abuse. So what does all of this mean? Here's where the legal brilliance shines. By framing the Brown marriage as a business, by treating Dabsark Entertainment LLC as the corporate front it truly was, the plaintiffs stripped away Cody's patriarch persona and exposed him as a corrupt CEO. Robyn was no longer a delicate victim, she was a white-collar accomplice. This wasn't a messy family breakup. It was a corporate dissolution, cold, ruthless, provable. The drama was now in place. The filing in court placed Christine, Janelle, and Meri in the roles of investors holding the executives accountable, and Cody and Robyn were in the positions of the shady executives who had bankrupted the company. The evidence was set, the witnesses were in place, and the showdown in court was a certainty. And when it was time for that trial, the theatrics on Sister Wives all of a sudden seemed like kid stuff, because what went down in that courthouse, beyond the prying eyes of TLC's cameras, would reveal secrets darker and more incriminating than even the viewing audience at home ever could have imagined. Coming up in Party 2, the trial itself. If you thought the clash in that Flagstaff meeting room was heated, wait until you hear about the trial. This is where years of deception, emotional testaments, and concealed financial statements all come crashing down. And according to sources, there was even a pivotal witness who knew where all the bodies were buried. This was trial of the century for the Browns, and it was going to happen live in front of a judge, with no cuts, no do-overs, and no secrets. The gallery was all but empty. No rubbernecking masses, no television lights, just the bare minimum. Lawyers, paralegals, a few clerks, and some carefully selected family members. The adult offspring were deliberately absent. Their mothers had ruled out taking them through this dirty chapter of this ordeal. This wasn't show. This was a fight for their children's futures, and the plaintiffs came with an Everest, no, a fortress of evidence. Their lawyers, under the command of a tough, unemotional litigator by the name of Ms. Albright, would not begin with appeals for sympathy. There were no rhetorical flourishes, no shaking voices. Rather, they built them facts, one chilly brick at a time, until they had constructed walls around Cody and Robyn. Next was the approach that made the courtroom lean in. Ms. Albright made use of Cody and Robyn's own words to construct the story. Years worth of footage condensed into a confession reel. Clip after clip of Sister Wives dominated the screen. Not the cuddly family dinners or intimate moments, but the times when money and control slipped out of their lips like loose truths. Your Honor, said Ms. Albright calmly, Exhibit A14, Season 14, Episode 8, Cody's face on the screen, shoulders set. I'm the one calling the final shots. It's a patriarchy. I'm the patriarch of this family, and what I say goes. Exhibit A15, Season 16. Cody on the screen again. Am I the only one who's scared of the wolf at the door? We are broke. We are drowning, Ms. Albright did not shout. She didn't have to. As the court can see, Mr. Brown consistently asserted sole control over the family finances, while, in essentially the same breath, insisting that the family was impoverished. The reasoning was straightforward and crushing. He nominated himself as the fiduciary, then behaved like a man with no responsibility. The visuals became even more incriminating. Staff rolled in oversized flowcharts, taller than a person, spiderwebs of boxes and arrows tracing the flow of money. The first, Dabsark income distribution. Thick green arrows, TLC payments, the wives' earnings, fed into the central LLC. Then the second chart, asset diversion 2018-2022. From the central pot, bold red arrows ripped away hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not to Christine's household, not to Janelle's, not to Meri's. Those red lines led to two ominous destinations: purchase of Flagstaff Home, R. Brown, and KSW Products. LLC bank statements scrolled on the projector, transfers highlighted in neon yellow. The memos sounded like evasions. Household expenses, reimbursement, but the figures, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, laughed at the notion of groceries and electric bills. This was not bookkeeping. This was a story of extraction, dictated in deposits and debits. It wasn't until the paper trail had nailed the tail to the wall that Ms. Albright shifted the court's focus to human cost. Numbers turned into faces. Line items turned into lives. Janelle was brought on first. Serene, measured, every response spoken like a ledger notation. Accurate, irrefutable. Ms. Brown, Ms. Albright began, and Janelle leaned forward, setting the record straight with silent dignity. Can you tell me about your living arrangement during the summer of 2021? I was staying in an RV on our raw land at Coyote Pass, Janelle responded, voice firm but etched with pain. And why did you stay in an RV? Because my rental home had been sold, she explained, and there was no money available in the family funds to finance a new house. Cody said we were broke. He said that trailer was the only choice and we had to save. And while you were residing in that trailer, occasionally with no running water, where did the defendants, Cody and Robyn Brown, reside? In the house they bought for almost $1 million with their 5 kids. The house bought at least partially with your funds? Janelle took a breath, held it, and released it. Yes, with our funds. Then Christine stood up and the temperature in the room shifted. Her calm broke once. Then she braced her shoulders and spoke the words every mother fears to utter. Ms. Brown, Ms. Albright inquired softly, please describe Isabel's condition prior to surgery. She was in pain all the time. Her spine curvature was more than 50 degrees, Christine replied, voice choking. She couldn't sleep. Breathing was hard. Every day was painful. Did her father know? Yes, Christine replied. He must have known, of course. When the surgery finally came around, scattered all over the nation at the peak of the pandemic, did her father go with her? Christine shook her head. One tear etched its way down, slow and irrevocable. No, he declined. What did he cite? He said his COVID procedures wouldn't permit it, she replied, the frost creeping back into her voice. He said he couldn't be away from Robyn's kids for that long. Ms. Albright addressed the judge. Your Honor, Exhibit C-42. The screen showed posts on social media. Weeks after refusing to travel to his daughter's life-altering surgery, Mr. Brown and defendant Robyn Brown went to an out-of-state wedding of a friend. Christine locked eyes with Cody. No shrieking, no drama, just icy cold precision. He performed a wedding, she told him. He could fly for his friends, but not for his daughter. I raised the funds. I helped her walk, alone. The room went silent, the soundproof reality thumping in everyone's chest. This wasn't a dispute over budget. This was policy made cruel. It became the pulsating heart of the intentional infliction of emotional distress claim, gaslighting, neglect, humiliation, all against the backdrop of a fear-filled girl on an operating table. And then came the defense, and the mood changed from tragedy to farce. Their playbook consisted of a muddle of denial, blame-shifting, and hurt pride. Cody, in the witness box, swaggered until the questions became acrid. Mr. Brown, his own attorney asked quietly, did you ever intend to cheat your wives? Never, Cody retorted. I worked my fingers to the bone for 30 years. I kept this family afloat. They don't know what leadership is. The sacrifices I made. Cross-examination, however, is where illusions are terminally ill. Ms. Albright advanced, clinical and uncompromising. Mr. Brown, you testified the family was in poverty. But here, she patted a page, are bank statements of KSW Products LLC recording a $5,000 payment to a high-end watch retailer in Scottsdale. Is that an expense of necessity? That was an investment in the business, Cody stuttered. You have to project success in order to achieve success. You have to spend money in order to make money. For whom? Ms. Albright inquired, voice as frigid as glass. For Janelle in her trailer or for you? Cody's fist struck the rail. This is a witch hunt, he bellowed. They left the family, and now they want to take what I created. They want to take my money. There it was, under oath, forever preserved by the court reporter, my money. A gift-wrapped confession for the plaintiffs, the patriarch speaking the quiet part out loud. Next was Robyn, whose testimony crumpled under the pressure of its own tears. She attempted to portray herself as the dutiful wife, hands scrubbed, eyes cast down. I never knew about the money, she cried. Cody did all that. I just wanted a family. They're taking this and making me into a monster. I was defending my little kids. But Ms. Albright was prepared, scalpel firm. Ms. Brown, she started, you state that you didn't know anything. But you are managing member and co-signatory together with Mr. Brown of KSW Products LLC. Is that your signature on the documents of incorporation? Through tears, Robyn blinked at the page. I suppose so, Cody said to sign. He said to sign, Ms. Albright echoed quietly. You never questioned what you were signing. You, co-founder of my sister wife's closet, a woman who positions herself as a business professional, signed business documents without knowing their intent? He said it was to keep the family safe, Robyn whispered. To defend the family, Ms. Albright said, inclining her head. Let's talk about how you defended them. A bailiff placed a thick binder on the table before Robyn. These are American Express bills for the KSW Products LLC business card. In your name. Turn to page 12. March 2021. The same month Christine Brown was racing around to pay for her daughter's surgery. Do you notice the Williams-Sonoma fees for $2,800? That was office supplies, Robyn whispered. Office supplies, Ms. Albright recited, opening a subpoenaed list. Top-of-the-line espresso machine, a sous vide cooker, crystal goblets, on a non-functional business. She paused. Turn to page 18. A string of buys from Precious Moments for more than $4,000. And Ladro, $3,500 in porcelain collectibles. Also business expenses? They were investments, Robyn said, voice cracking. Investments or a personal slush fund? Ms. Albright asked, each word landing like a gavel. While your sister wife's earnings filled the account, while one sister's child lay in agony awaiting surgery, you were, let's be blunt, buying dolls. Is that your testimony? Robyn had no reply. And in the silence, the story fell into place. The trail of money, the high-end shopping spree, the vacant RV at Coyote Pass, the daughter on the operating table without her father, each item fell into place. The plaintiffs didn't need to scream. The evidence shouted for them. The facade did not merely crack, it detonated into dust. Those expense reports were not only suspicious, they were the smoking gun. Line after line testified that this was never in the name of protection or prudence. It was about hunger. It was premeditated, it was systematic, and it was carved right there in black ink and electronic footprints for the court to examine. Then, the moment that flipped the whole proceeding on its head, the final insider. Just when the defendants appeared to have reached the cliff edge, Ms. Albright brought forward her last witness, and the name caused an audible shiver to run around the room. The plaintiffs called Mindy Jessup, Robyn's stepniece, the longtime nanny, the man who had lived under their roof, broken bread at their table, overheard the off-air ramblings that never found their way onto television. If anybody was privy to what really went on behind closed doors, it was Mindy. Her testimony was a bombshell. Unflappable, articulate, and painfully detailed, she informed the court that Robyn wasn't a bystander, she was a mastermind. It was Robyn's suggestion, she said, to create the second LLC. She overheard it herself. Robyn referred to it as their nest egg, a secret stash to protect their future because she didn't believe the other wives would remain faithful to Cody. Faithfulness, Mindy testified, was the prism through which each dollar was passed. And those strategy sessions, they were the norm. Mindy explained how Robyn and Cody would sit down with the family budget, line by line, pointing out Janelle's and Christine's household spending. Robyn would gesture and label, wasteful, unnecessary, they don't need that. Then, as Mindy remembered, they'd draw an equal amount from the main account and transfer it into their private pipeline. They had a name for it, balancing the scales. But none of it was balanced. It was a siphon with a smile. The most damning reality, however, cut to the heart beyond money. The rules. The protocols. The manner in which the pandemic was used as a weapon. Mindy attested that the restrictions were for everybody else, never for Cody and Robyn. Friends visited and departed at their house, while the rest of the household was cautioned to stay away. The nanny, that is to say Mindy, could come and go as she pleased. But Cody's own kids were kept at arm's length. It wasn't about the virus, she whispered. It was about control. If Cody couldn't observe the others, then he couldn't be swayed by them. Keep him near. Keep him needy. Keep him compliant. That was the idea all along, Mindy said. With that, the conspiracy theory ceased to exist and became a transcript. The money diversions were no longer attributed to confusion or disarray. They were decisions. The hypocrisy was not a perception. It was a calendar and an account. There were no longer questions for the defense. Silence spoke louder. Weeks of testimony led to one day. No jury, just a bench trial and a judge known for her attention to detail. When the verdict came in, it fell like a sledgehammer. Judge Eleanor Vance had no use for wasted syllables. She looked at Cody and Robyn straight on, her voice ringing with authority and a chilly sort of dismay that contracted the room. This, she asserted, was no error of sloppy bookkeeping or regrettable miscommunication. What transpired over several years was a pattern, calculated, deliberate, and imbued with arrogance and greed. She informed Cody that the patriarch he pretended to be resembled much more a parasite, enjoying the work of the very partners he was obligated to safeguard. Fiduciary responsibility, she reminded him, is not showmanship. It is law. And he violated it over and over again. And then she turned to Robyn. The "I didn't know" mantle didn't just fall short of convincing. Judge Vance deemed it insulting. The evidence reflected Robyn wasn't dragged along. She co-piloted the craft. She used her children's needs as a shield, a shroud for decision-making that fattened up one home while starving the others. Not maternal protection, predatory opportunism. The subsequent judgment was no slap on the wrist. It was a dismantling. The court directed the entities at the center of the scheme to be dissolved immediately. Dabsark Entertainment, LLC, and the fictitious KSW Products, LLC. Assets were frozen. A forensic accounting was ordered. An initial fine of $1.5 million was imposed on Cody and Robyn against the plaintiffs, an amount noted as conservative, subject to the final tally of the accounting. Next was the provision that addressed the children who had been left behind due to favoritism. The judge specified that 50% of all future income from the Sister Wives show, or ancillary media, involving any parties, must be directed into a court-monitored trust for the original 13 offspring of Cody, Janelle, Christine, and Meri, education, healthcare, housing deposits. The warning was clear. Provision must now go where responsibility long insisted. Coyote Pass, that desert of unkept promises, would be addressed as well. The court ruled for a partition and sale, no more deadlock, no more bargaining. And to make the judgment stick, a lien was issued on Cody and Robyn's $1 million house. If the $1.5 million wasn't forthcoming within 90 days, the house would be auctioned off. That wasn't a threat. It was a timetable. And since harm is not just monetary, the verdict also acknowledged the cruelty brought against Christine and her daughter. For the anguish of Isabel's operation, the abandonment disguised as protocol, the court paid Christine an extra $500 for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The law had a term for what was done to that child and that mother. It called it, and it tagged it. The consequences for Cody and Robyn were immediate and awful. They were underwater financially. They didn't have a stash of hidden cash big enough to cover the judgment. The forced sale of their house wasn't a threat. It was the next item on the to-do list. At work, the branding bestowed by the court, greedy, dishonest, irresponsible stewards, made them toxic. Even were the cameras to continue rolling, half of whatever could be made would now go to the children who had been forced to make their own way. The nest egg they had accumulated on everyone else's dime shattered wide open. And then, in the stillness of the courtroom, our imagination's camera would see the plaintiffs. No victory whoops, no strut. Just shaken, silent breathing. Christine took Janelle's hand. Squeeze, release, a sign that the marathon was over. Janelle's shoulders relaxed for the first time in years, the invisible backpack of numbers and concern falling to the ground. Meri closed her eyes, one tear tracing a clean path. They didn't walk out as ex-wives left behind by a patriarch. They emerged as women who had shown what was real in the only place it counted anymore, a courtroom, because this victory was never ever about the money. It was about truth. About having a judge affirm what they had been instructed to disbelieve for so many years, that they weren't crazy, bitter, or divisive. They were cheated. They'd been gaslighted. And now they were liberated. Liberated from Cody's grip, liberated from Robyn's manipulations, liberated from the financial shackles that bound them to a failing empire. This epic, exposed in our probe, unfolds like a contemporary saga. It's one of family and religion, and of what transpires when favoritism, manipulation, and dishonesty are permitted to run amok. The idea of plural marriage didn't kill the Browns. Ancient Temptations did. A patriarch was reminded that his responsibility was to all his children, not merely to those who dwelled in the home of the wife who commanded his attention, but in the wreckage, something more powerful arose. 3 women who were trained to be silent, obedient, and sweet discovered a loyalty greater than allegiance to an imperfect man. Loyalty to one another and to their children. Their voices, previously schooled into a whisper, rose into a roar that rang within a courtroom and brought down a kingdom founded upon domination. Christine, Janelle, and Meri took back their power, their money, and their lives. To anyone who has ever been gaslighted, manipulated, or financially blackmailed, their path illuminates a way forward, set by courage, honesty, and unrelenting accountability. The Brown family's greatest legacy may not be the TV sensation that made them a household name, but this last, hard-won chapter proving accountability is not merely optional, and that honesty always gets its day in court. That, it is the narrative our sources have put together, an odyssey from silence to verdict, from doubt to acquittal. Now it's your turn. Which moment landed the most with you? Do you think the verdict met the injustice? And what's the future of this family now that the secrets aren't secrets anymore? Leave your thoughts, your emotions, and your speculation in the comments. This is a conversation, and your voice counts here. Thanks for going deep with us. If you find that this truth warranted light, like, subscribe, and share. See you next time. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and stay savvy.